the application and the ways we can tie these together. Let me just get organized here so I can make sure that you can hear me okay. That's good. And I'll just minimize that and make sure I close out of email so I don't get any unwarranted pop-ups there. Hopefully that's good. So 5, let me hit the F5 to start presenting. Well, good. So thanks very much for the introduction, and I'll just jump right in because this is an amazing set of opportunities we've got that are going on right now. Right now, you're seeing a convergence. Let me hit the function F5 or shift F. Yeah, there we go. There, that should be better. Can you still see me okay? We're all right? Great. So we've got this really amazing opportunity to talk about some important things that are driving movement inside the Dynamics environment, or the people who are using Dynamics or Dataverse, using Power Apps on top of it. Ultimately, that's that Dataverse platform underneath, but really helping those of you who are using those tools or working within a company using those tools to drive like exponentially new value out of it. And by that, I'm thinking of the fact that we have so much rich data inside of Dataverse right now. We spend a lot of time working to get people to adopt the platform and take advantage of it, and then only to then see that data just sit there by itself. And what we want to do is see how can we take that data, get it out, summarize it, draw insights off of it so that our business partners, the people within our teams, can really make good value of that data and can take advantage of it so that they can understand what's going on and make great decisions. It's really an opportunity to both enrich the data, enrich the use of the team, of Dataverse or this Power Platform that we have. And ultimately, I got to say from personal experience, it's a great way to enrich your own career, to help build out additional skills that really drive value for you and for your customers and for your internal team. So right now, what we have is a situation where we've got Dataverse, this Power Platform, this amazing tool that's driving so much innovation already, and we also have Power BI, which is used by nearly 12 million people a month. So it's a huge market over here. But the intersection between the two, the people who are really engaged with both of those, is a very little small part of the Venn diagram between. My goal on the Power BI CAT team is to help others take advantage of it and see if we can bring those two closer together so that more people who are using Dataverse take advantage of Power BI. And also on the other side, I'm working with my Power BI colleagues to say, look how important this Dataverse platform is in terms of really rapidly solving business problems in the organization right now. So I'm helping trying to bring those together. I've been with Microsoft for now going on 4 years now. And my focus has always been this intersection between Dataverse and Power BI. I started on the Dataverse side. Before I came to Microsoft, I was in the field implementing Dynamics since literally version 1.0. So about 2002-ish, I was implementing the very first versions. And in those first versions, we were building those, and it was kind of this really interesting thing that you could implement a piece of software that you could make some adapt it a little bit, make some changes. Then the version 1.2 came out, and version 3, and we just saw incremental and exponential growth of this platform to be this rich thing we work with right now. Over that course of that time, I kept seeing how much effort I put into helping customers get the data into their system. I saw all this impressive information being gathered and processed and brought together, and then yet the business decision maker was often left at the very end of the project with almost the scraps of the project dollars to say, here's the summary, or here's some insights that we can scrape together out of this platform for you. And in fact, that's really a backwards look at it. We really ought to be looking at how do we build our platform so that we can drive both the operational side, but also build insight and value into the organization. So as a Dataverse, Power Platform, Power Apps, Dynamics expert, why do I care about this? 3 areas. Number one, it expands the usability and value of your application. You can build it, and we're going to talk about this. We're going to see how you build a 360-degree view of what's inside of Dataverse plus what's outside of Dataverse. Bring that together for your users, for your managers, for your decision makers, and really make Dataverse that must go-to place to go get great information. Second, Dataverse has a nice reporting operational tool inside of it, but it has limitations. It's really designed for um, originally for small groups, individuals. That's kind of the scale that it works well with. When you know if you built a dashboard and you have more than 50,000 rows in it, it'll say, hey, you can't process all that. I mean, that's really there to protect the system from being overloaded by somebody running a ginormous report and making it, dimming the lights and then making the report slow for everybody else. So that's kind of a protection area. But if you do have a lot more data than that, it's really good to have it offloaded into an analytics tool like Power BI so that you can summarize those large data sets. Being able to bring data from outside of Dataverse in. If I have Dataverse, I've got this, I hate to call it a silo because it really is, there's a lot of interconnected within pieces there, but really no business that I know of runs the entirety of their business solely on Dynamics. Usually there's other systems involved, like an inventory system or some sort of shipping system or an ERP system that might be even Dynamics 365 F&O might be needing attached to it, or there might be some external application that you want to use. Really using Power BI allows you to bring those tools together and surface that information inside of Dynamics. We'll talk about that in a moment. So we don't have to lift and shift that data. And then it ultimately brings you AI tools over that data you have. We also are able to see contextual reports. By that, I mean, if I go to the Contoso record or the Contoso customer record or account record, I should be able to see the information that's in Dynamics. Plus, I can click over to a tab and see a Power BI report that's pre-filtered to Contoso. So I see that information there. I can tell you in my own team, I'll talk about it in a minute. I'll save that. It's a pretty exciting story we have associated with how we do that. And ultimately, again, it is that approach to speed adoption because you're putting it's that carrot. You're putting something really valuable in the hands of your users by embedding Power BI into it. They get the insights, they get the visuals, they get the AI tools there, and it really exposes the value of all this hard work you're doing up to the decision makers. Suddenly the managers are coming to you saying, hey, this tool that you're working on is becoming central and critical to what we do every day. Let's expand the value and the scope and what you're working on to make it even richer. So it's a great thing. So agenda, we're going to talk about build the opportunities to bring those into Power Apps or to Dynamics 365 CE. We're talking about options on how do you get data from Dataverse to Power BI and also other ways of connecting. And finally, a very important piece near the end, we're going to talk about using Azure Synapse Link for Dataverse. Some of you are using or your organizations may be using the data export service that's been a part of Dynamics for several years. The data export service was built and it writes out data from Dynamics into an Azure SQL database that's hosted up there so that you can then write reports off it or whatever you need to do. That's been in place for many years, but that's already been deprecated. It was announced in November, and this Azure Synapse Link is the replacement for it. And there's a little bit of work to do to make that replacement in place, but it really gives us an opportunity to scale up from there. So we'll talk about how that piece works to replace the data export service that so many customers are still using. So how do we bring the two together? Obviously, you know how you can put a Dataverse report inside of Dynamics. We can embed a report like we're seeing here right inside. And so we've got the click-throughs and the drag and drops, and we got the navigation. It's very nice to be able to integrate it right in there. We can also take, like I mentioned, the contextual side, going to a form like I'm on the Fabricam account record, and I can go from there and click a 360-degree view and see a Power BI report surfaced right inside that account record, bringing me data for Fabricam as well as from data outside of Dynamics or Dataverse, bringing that together so that I have that full 360-degree view. Another way we can see it is by the way, there is a official documentation on embedding it into the report into a dashboard. It was originally, it's been a while, but it was originally only personal reports or personal dashboards you could embed. Now it's actually available as part of the solution, part of the configuration. And coming up, we do have it being added to the solutioning. So there, by the way, if you want to embed it in a form, this is a great tool. One of the MVPs wrote it. It's currently the best way I know of to get a report into Power BI, but using the XRM toolbox, really simple, straightforward. It allows you to embed it. And then in this case, if you'll notice down the right, I'm passing the contact table. I'm passing the account ID over to that table. So just a really simplistic way of bringing that forward. If you haven't noticed already, we've added a Dataverse quick view where we're inside a form or a view of Dataverse, and up in the top, we've got a visualize this view button. You click on it, and it brings out an auto-generated Power BI report. A couple of things that are going on with this. By the way, I have this sped up a lot because it is building a report. It's generating it based on the query that you're looking at inside of Dataverse, building it real time, and then putting all that data into a data set and then visualizing it. Two things. Right now, the preview does not allow you to save it, but the save is actually part of the GA plan. And second, the preview, if you'll see on the right, it's pulling in the schema names of all the fields. I've already seen the preview of the preview where we're pulling in the display names. So it will really make it richer and easier for users to use. If you haven't tried that out, please take a look, give us feedback on where that is. But that's actually available, and you can enable that per app in your environment. We are adding the ability to make reports solution aware. There's a private preview in place. We should see a public preview very soon. It allows me to take a Power BI data set or a report, add it to my solution, and then I can move that and publish it to the next, from dev to prod to GA, or to dev to test to prod, whatever I need to do, I can move those together. And as I publish the solution, it will create a workspace for the reports in that solution, and it becomes part of that deployment pipeline. So that should help as you're moving between environments. Very, very nice feature, very much an enterprise demand feature that we've been adding here lately. So it's very good. So we're seeing here we've got the solution and moving it up. So one of the things that I'll say from my perspective, when I started working with Power BI and Dataverse, one of the challenges I had was, how do I get my Dataverse data into my Power BI reports? And I'll say I work for Microsoft. I'll follow on our sword, because what we've done in the past has been to only provide documentation on sort of a silo basis, where we would say, here is one approach, and we'd walk you through that approach to get the data in. But we gave you no context of saying, yeah, but that approach at large data sizes is slow. Or here's another approach. You can do that, but that's kind of overkill for what you may be trying to use. Or this approach preserves security, this approach does not, but here's a way to address security in those models. We've really not done a great job of highlighting how those different tools work together. What I'm doing is I'm trying to bring that out and making it easy to consume, so that you can get started and avoid some of the mistakes that I made when I got started. So what are the options we have? we've got Dataverse plus direct query. This is one of the most exciting things that we added many years ago, a few years ago, where we allow you to run a report in Power BI that points to Dataverse, and at the moment I point the report to there, it queries the data, pulls that back, but it's pulling it back with my security in place. So if I'm a sales user and I'm only allowed inside of Dataverse to see the opportunities that I'm currently working on, that's all that's going to come into the Power BI report. So it preserves that security. That's pulling it through layers and layers of the API inside of CRM, and then pulling it out across the wire into Power BI. So there is a lag involved. So it's really best involved for smaller data sets. If we need to pull it out and make that report faster to operate, we might pull it from Dataverse into an import mode. So we're pointing a Power BI report directly at Dataverse using the TDS endpoint, connecting it, and I can query it just like I'm querying a SQL server, and pull that data, import it. Once I've imported it, that report becomes much snappier because the data is preloaded and cached, so very fast. And we can actually even do incremental refreshes, but that kind of needs to be carefully managed. A new feature that's been added to Power BI literally in the last 2 weeks is a preview of data marts. Data marts are a way we can point a data mart to the data inside of Dynamics, pull it into a data location that I can query. I can build a report directly on that. I can even supplement it from data that I'm pulling from other systems. Like I'm using Power Query to pull that data in, and I can build a really rich data set there that I can point to, and my fellow users can point other reports that they might want off that same data. They can build a report and grab it from there. So that's a piece that's emerging. It's fairly new. Well, it's extremely new, I should say. And we're going to see a lot of iteration over that for the next several months. Finally, the last piece, and this is the one I mentioned earlier, that is a combination of bringing the data from Dynamics and exposing it through the data lake and Azure Synapse on top of that in a really easy to use, rich way. I can pull massive amounts of data in and keep it up to date. And literally, I kid you not, it's only a handful of clicks to set it up and get it running. Had great success with this. I'm seeing on the enterprise side to pull that out so that people can take advantage of that data. It can be moved into enriched with machine learning. There's a lot of tools. It can be set up a data pipeline that can move it into other applications. Data can be moved back into Dynamics from there if we want to enrich it with machine learning. So really an impressive, powerful way to scale up as large as you want. Literally, it's the largest way to do that, but surprisingly an easy way to do it. So let's talk about those first options, connecting Power BI to Dataverse. Now I'm going to move through this section very quickly because I don't want to get bogged down too far, but there are some tips and tricks that I've found that should help you avoid challenges or confusions that I had originally. So I'm just sharing with you what I've come up with or what I ran into, and I'll be happy to show you what I've got here. There's a Dataverse connector inside of Power BI that I can click in the ribbon, point to Power BI data set or Power BI report, and pull the Dataverse, pull that into the report, and consume it very quick to get started. You see right there in the Dataverse connector. I can either use import or direct query. The direct query is the import is the pre-cached version. The direct query says wait until you open the report to go get the data. So two options on that side. I can write a SQL query against Dataverse now with the TDS endpoint. I can point that, write a query, and do things that I couldn't do. I come from a background where I write SQL queries very easily. If that's something that you're familiar with, it's an easy way to get started. I can also use that to replicate my user or the current users. So like when I write the report, if I want the report to default to be filtered to only my opportunities or my accounts or whatever, I can add the current user variable in there, and it will only return the values where I'm the owner or where I'm associated with whatever it is that I want to do. So nice feature there to be able to add to that. So here's the best practices. This is the part I'm going to move through very quickly. Stay focused on the use case. I can't say that enough. That's so important. The other part is, as Dataverse experts, you're accustomed to just this universe of data, all these tables that are interjoined and multiple relationships between each table, all kinds of, and then lots and lots and lots of stuff, all interacting within itself, and it's great. It works great for data for a CRM application, not so much for an analytics application. When we move into the analytics side, it's hard to get, if you're accustomed to this format or this sort of organization, it's hard to get accustomed to the change you need to think in terms. But we really want to model the data for the data set we're working on into what we call a star schema. And that's because we got a center and then we get pieces moving out from the middle of it. So the center of the star is like our opportunity table. Think about it, if we're doing a sales report or a sales, like a series of sales reports. But really, our opportunities are a fact. We call them fact records. And that points out to dimensions that sort of help define what that fact is. The fact is really the thing that says, here's what I'm counting, or here's where I'm finding the averages, or here's where I'm looking at trends. And my dimensions are the areas like what product or what campaign or which account, which sales user. Those are the dimensions around the side of it. It's a little bit of a challenge to get accustomed to that, but fortunately we have some really good information on the site right now, understanding star schema and the importance of it for Power BI. But when you bring data into Dataverse, or excuse me, into Power BI from Dataverse, you're going to really need to reorganize that data into facts and dimensions in order to make your report fast, also make it easy to write queries against. And it also helps you focus on what's really important to that user, that group of users, so you're solving the right problem. And it means that you can have multiple stars out there, but each one really is focused on kind of a problem domain that we're working within. So again, we're going to move faster through this area, and we're going to say minimizing the query columns. One of the things, if I point to that Dataverse connector and import that, it's going to say, here's all the columns that are in the account table, all 300 columns are in there. But I may only need 4 or 5 of those columns for any of the reports I'm going to write. I may never have children's name. Children's name is not going to be part of my report. So I just need the name, city, state, territory, owner, the status, those kind of things. So I'm going to go in and go to the query editor and choose to say, these are the only columns I want. And that gives me this really, really short list and rich data set that I can work with. Very important. Taking advantage of the query editor, I can write advancing, and I can fine tune that. There's actually ways I can grab a simple query and just start with that. That's kind of the way I usually start with it. 2 other things, if you're using the Dataverse connector, which, by the way, it's called the Dataverse connector in the UI, but when you look at it inside the query editor, it has the old name of Common Data Service.database. It's just left over from there. But make sure if you're using that, you check to see if you can use the hints, create navigation properties equals false. That cuts down on the synchronization time because it's not going out looking at all the tables this one table I'm pulling in are related to. Think about the system user table. I was trying to pull in a system user table, and it was going out and checking all the relationships that thing has to every other table in the system. And most tables, it's got 3 or 4 relationships too. In this case, I put that in and said, nope, ignore that. All I want is the system user ID and their full name. That's all I want. Don't go try and mess with the other, don't go chasing those waterfalls with the relationships. Pull this in, makes the load time much, much faster. If you want, like I mentioned earlier, if you want to write SQL against against Dataverse, there's a second hint called enable folding. Folding is a term from Power BI that we use a lot, and it's really the idea of you're pulling data from Dynamics into Power BI. Where are you going to filter that? You could pull all the data over and say, I only want these two columns, but that's really slow because I've spent all this effort pulling the whole database in, and then all those columns and all that data, it's being transferred over, and then only to just drop most of it, because discard most of it. The idea of folding says, take everything I'm asking for and pass that to CRM and let CRM only return the data that I want. So it's returning only that subset. So it makes it much faster to get it across the wire, as opposed to pulling everything over and only then starting to remove the excess. We're going to trim the fat by enable folding. That's the idea of query folding, pushing it over so that CRM takes care of reducing the data set before it gets pulled over. Avoiding large blocks of text, that's just a common thing to be aware of. That's not analytic data. You write SSRS reports with that, or what we call paginated reports. That's really good for that. But for analytics purposes, we're really looking for those facts, those real detailed facts that we want to highlight so that we can graph, because you're not going to graph a blob of text, right? Now, minimizing choice levels, I'll give you the details of this, but it's a really rare option. Consider dual mode. There's deeper information on our site about what that is. If you're using direct query, it's a way to reduce the number of queries going back to the server. So making sure the query folds, like I mentioned before. And finally, when I publish it, don't forget the checkbox. The checkbox, if I'm using direct query and I publish it, I need to make sure I check that box to say, use the credentials of the current viewer, pass those credentials up to Dataverse so that they can see what's going on within the context of their own security. So that's an important checkbox. One other thing I have to forget is if you've added option sets, and this is really if you're Dataverse, if you're Power Query expert, a Power BI, or if you're an expert in Dataverse or Dynamics or Power Apps, the idea that you add customizations and forget to publish them, you're not going to do that. That's something you do naturally. However, I've seen a lot of people who are new to the Power Platform and are just getting started with this exciting platform, and they'll import a customization, and it shows up in the UI, like the option sets, but those option sets don't show up in the Power BI report. It's a real simple fix. Just make sure that those option sets have been published, because when you publish it, it makes it available to the API that the Power BI report is reading from. Very simple, but I'm surprised how many times I've seen that get just inadvertently overlooked. So now let me jump into a report real quick. I'm going to come back to this piece because I've got a minute here. I want to go into my environment here. So I'm in, let's see, I'll tell you what, before I do that, I'm going to go to my Dataverse ADL, pull that up. Let me show you what a report that sits on top of Dynamics data might look like. So this is an example report that I built, and you can grab this sample report just as to play with and tinker with. I've got this one built on an extracted data set. I've got another version that's coming in that's going to use the Azure Synapse link, and it's available. It'll be available so that one you can actually run in production if you wanted to. If it met your requirements, it's designed to use only the out-of-the-box fields and only the out-of-the-box tables. And I tried to keep it pretty narrow in terms of the scope of it. I don't know that I know two people that use Dynamics the same way exactly. So not everything's gonna be the same for you, but it at least doesn't demand you add anything to your Dynamics environment in order to get the report to at least run or to connect. So in this case, I'm looking at a Power BI a data set built on top of Dynamics data, and I get the ability, obviously, cross filter. So when I choose the state of Texas, the rest of the data gets filtered accordingly. Or if I choose the US South territory, the rest of the data gets highlighted and filtered accordingly. Now, I might be interested in a particular product that we have, and like the e-reader pen. If I highlight that and go over to the revenue for that product, I can get pop-ups of other reports that tell me specifics about what's going on with that product. This is something, if you're working with a business decision maker, they eat this stuff up because it's really easy to get an idea and drive in and start making decisions off of that and look and see what's going on. The other way I might look at it is from a team and user perspective. When I say, I want to see what Ethan Brooks's team is working on. Well, Ethan's on the Southeast, or Emil Garner is in the Northeast mostly. So I can drill further down and say, I want to drill into that team. I can see what each individual on the team is working on. Like Alan Steiner here is working on products in the upper Midwest, but he's got a pretty strong pipeline. So really an easy way to interact with the data we have so far, which is really nice to be able to do that and see what's happening. So I'm going to reset that and reset my filters and look at a little further. I'm going to show you another idea of how we can do this. We have the ability to do what if analysis on top of it, where I say, what if the qualified forecast was adjusted by a certain percentage? Meaning that I'm not going to, all the opportunities coming out of Dataverse, they're saying it's going to be $1,000 worth of opportunities or $1 million worth of opportunities. I might want to adjust that before I turn it in and make that my goal. So right now I'm looking at $25 million in my pipeline. That might be a little bit optimistic, shall we say. So as a manager, I might want to see what happens if their close ratio is similar to last year and they only close about 60%. So you see I've slide the slider over to negative 40, like it's dropping it by 40%. As soon as I let go of that, you're going to see this 25 million get recalculated into 15 million, meaning that once I put a bit of an overhead on that or a bit of a reality check on that data, I can get a tighter, smaller group of data and really take interest in that. I can drill further into it, look at win-loss ratios over the time and say, I can see who's winning more opportunities or losing more opportunities. And within that, I can even see like Mia here and Spencer, maybe Eric. Those three individuals have kind of a lower close ratio than everybody else. I might want to enroll them in additional sales training. So I can take this filtered list that I have here and click this button, which will enroll them in sales training using the power of Power Automate. So I've got a Power Automate button built in that allows me to enroll them in sales training by just taking that information. And then the Power Automate, as you know, you can write it to SharePoint or send them an email or send an external web service to say, here's some training that might help you bring your close ratio up and ultimately meet your own goals. So a real nice ability to interact with the data that I found, filtering it through Power BI from Dynamics. Then I take that action by using Power Automate. Really a strong solution that you can offer your teams or your customers. Other visualizations are just really interesting to be able to see over time how things have worked. We can also do pop-ups. So if I look at the Andorra group, I can either drill through to them, I can look at a pop-up, or like I said, if I can drill through, I can look at an account details report. So again, I'm looking at a record. I say I want to find more information about that. I can drill through to a sub-report that gives me visibility into that. We'll show you a different way to see that in a moment. Other tools we have are the ability to do trend analytics and use AI. And you're not building any AI tools outside of this. You're just using the things that are built in. None of this is custom, really. I've just put this in, dropped it in, and made it easy to see where I can see a forecast going forward, or even I can see sales insights that Power BI automatically comes across, or insights on the data where I can say, hey, there's a recent anomaly in the revenue one, where on Thursday, May 26th, we had higher than expected revenue. So if I click on that, it will then analyze the data and come up with possible explanations and says, you know what, for the campaign type online campaigns, we had an unusually high success rate that may have lifted it. So it's looking at maybe a purchase process individual. We had an unusually high lift for those people in that purchase process. So it's a really interesting way that Power BI just drives insights automatically. I also look at things like the revenue won by close month and ratio, where we see, hey, there's a jump here in March or a jump in May. Let's look at March and see, why was March different from previous months? And I can just click it, analyze the increase, and it will do a quick analysis. It runs across the data and says, well, we had the most increase in warm and cold ratings. Ones were in develop and qualify and probability, in fact, but we had the biggest increase among opportunities that did not have a campaign associated with it. So maybe something else was going on. So there was a big jump there, and a big jump where, let's say, in the US South. So quick way of being able to look at the data that we have in Dynamics, pull it out, analyze it, find insights that may help us drive more towards the goal that we have in place. Finally, we have the key insights, or the insights that can be driven off of this. And again, you're not coding any of this. You're just using the tools that are out of the box and using, like in this case, the key influencer visual, where I can say what increases the close percentage to increase. And that's overall, it's the transportation industry or transportation services. But I can drive into maybe just in the devices setting. If I do click on devices, it's going to refilter the others and then find out for devices, we make the close percentage jumps when the value of when it's a smaller opportunity, which kind of makes sense. But a smaller opportunity, the value drops down. We make a lot more sales in those cases. So just a real interesting way of being able to see and visualize the data that we have inside this. Like in this case, we want to analyze which products within the categories have the most value. And then within that, let's drill it out to the territories and find out which territories are really driving the e-reader pen, or which territories are really driving the black cover, 6-inch black cover. Which I know we're all excited about the 6-inch black cover, because that was just such a game changer of a tool. But I wanted to show you the same data. If I show you this and pull this into Power BI, into Dynamics, I can see that I have it just right in my menu, and I've got exactly the same report right here. I can do the same things and see the same insights really just embedded directly in there. If I want to see it in full screen, I can pop it out in Power BI. But the other tool that I have is the ability to go to an individual record, like I mentioned earlier, where I have an individual record, and in that record, well, I should have ordered my account table. So here's my account table, and like I've got an Abbott group or whoever it is. Let's go to Abbott group, and we'll take them. And I've got my general report, the things that I have normally in Dynamics stored there, but I've also added an analytics tab, where in this analytics tab, I've got an embedded Power BI dashboard that lets me filter to just Abbott Group and see what's going on inside of Abbott Group. And again, getting that context record to be able to understand exactly what's happening, really a powerful insight. Now, let me move forward a little bit and jump forward to how do we get that data? In this case, let's look at, if I'm going into the Maker app and I go over here to the administration side, I'm switching gears really quickly to make sure that I give you a chance to see this whole process. I jump over to the Maker app, and I've got my normal things, my apps and my solutions. If I go into the Dataverse area, I have this choice down here. I've got my tables, my data flows, etc. But I have this thing called Azure Synapse Link. Azure Synapse Link is the tool that lets me write out to the data lake, and then from the data lake, I can pull it in through Azure Synapse, and it kind of sets all this up for me automatically and allows me to build really massive data sets on top of Dynamics so that they can be available for Power BI. So in this case, I've got a data store here, and you can see in my Synapse data store, I've got these tables. And as I make changes to the records, there's a synchronization that takes place and moves that data over so that it is available for me to consume. Where that's going is it pulls it into the data lake. The nice thing is when it pulls into the data lake, which is just a massive way of storing a lot of data really, really cheaply. It's being written out currently as CSV files. So they're just CSV files that are out there for it to consume. However, one of the nice things that's happening is now instead of like trying to parse through a bunch of CSV files, which are just big, giant, flat text files, it allows us to put a Synapse workspace in front of it. Now, that Synapse workspace is really simple. It allows me to point to the data in my lake, which is here, but I can put a view on top of it, and I can write a SQL query against it just like this. You're seeing that if I hit run, it'll run and execute that. And it's pulling the data, even though it's writing it like a SQL statement, it's reading it from from those files that are in the data lake and pulling in the results here. It runs it. It takes a minute to wake up. But the advantage of that is, big advantage there, is very, very cheap to operate. Very inexpensive. You're not running a SQL. You're not paying for a SQL Server license running. It allows you to see that data. What I've done is then you can bring that in and start developing the reports against it. In this case, I've got that same report that I showed you a minute ago. I can see that report from inside because this data is built into this environment. I can see the report right here where I can edit and interact with it as I work on it. So again, very integrated, nice tool to work together to pull all that in. So again, let me show you from a perspective of the presentation. I want to show you a couple ideas that will help you get up and running with this. And you can refer to the documentation, but these are some ideas that I found to be really useful when I got started so that I could start taking advantage of it as quickly as possible. Obviously, the data export service being shut down in November. What we're seeing is tools that I keep mentioning here is we're starting with the Synapse link from Dataverse. That will write into the data lake. And again, it's just a couple of clicks to set this up. All you have to do is set up a data lake, which literally is go into Azure and a handful of clicks and say what storage account or wherever you want to put it. Then you create an empty Synapse Analytics workspace. It's really just say, I want a Synapse workspace, and say which account, which subscription you want to tie it to. You don't have to configure anything inside of it. It's empty. The Synapse link for Dataverse will create a view there that reads from the data lake. It's just a view. There's nothing in it. It's just whenever you query it, it goes out and gets the data out of the data lake. Now, what I've found to be helpful is and I can write it directly to Power BI. What I found helpful is to add a second database, this custom report view, that I can restrict and say, I only want to include active records in my data set, or I want to exclude anything past 2 years, or I want to only show them these columns that are relevant. Because like I said, in the account table, there's a gazillion columns in the out of the box account table that most people never use, or most people never use all of them for sure. And so you can narrow it down and make it really tight and focused so that people can take advantage of that, pull it in Power BI, and have a really good success of making that happen. I showed you the administration page. This is what it looks like when you set it up. It starts off with it just kind of a blank. It says new link. And when you click that, it'll ask you for these 3-4 items on that. First off, I can say, here's my subscription in Azure. Here's the resource group, and here's the storage account that I'm going to put it in. Then I select my tables. And once it gets started, then it starts syncing, and I can point to the Synapse workspace that I want to use from it. And again, I've set up this custom view. That way, this data pipeline is being set up, and I really don't have to manage any of this. The only thing I'm managing is this piece right here, is I'm creating my custom views just to really fine tune it so that that report that I'm going to write really only has a really tight, fine group of data that I've vetted for it. By the way, up until a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, the option sets were this kind of convoluted way to get to it, but it actually showed up just recently that these option sets are now added as views in that table, and you can join them with your table so you get the readable version of that. It was a little bit of a hassle before that, but now this actually makes it very nice and easy. So, yeah, there's my custom view that allows me to write that query and just pull back the columns that I'm interested in. And then I can connect Power BI to those views just using SQL. And literally, it's just like I said here, it's a SQL database, and all that pulls in. And so now I've got Azure Synapse right into the data lake, going into the created views, a custom report view on top of it, and I've got my report built on top of that. And by the way, if you notice, this is using the new Power BI embedded into, it's called, what is it called? PowerPoint embedded. I forget the name, the term for it, but I've got a live report here that I can click on. I've got a live report just being surfaced inside of PowerPoint. So that makes it, some people who are like obsessed with PowerPoint reports, they're going to love this. That's great. But we can now put a Power BI report into a PowerPoint and potentially bore everybody. No, it's actually exciting. I love it. So a couple of benefits and considerations. One I should call out is, as you know, inside of Dataverse, all the data is stored in date time, UTC date time. So unless you live, I guess, in Greenwich, England, or right there on the zero timeline, it's always going to be something you need to adjust for in your time zones to deal with that. So you're going to want to take advantage of that. Once the data is out of Dataverse, the Dataverse security model is left behind because I've extracted that. Just like if I dumped that out of Excel, I've extracted it, but I can grab that data and build a fairly simple row-level security on top of that. I had a situation with a big Fortune 500 company a few months ago where they were trying to pull all this data out to build a report that was going to be given to the CEO. I was like, are they going to pull it direct query and pull it all out? I said, why are we spending so much effort in tuning this to make it fast in the direct query approach, when in fact the only person who's going to get this report, the people who are receiving this report, they have permission to see everything anyway. So a much faster approach is to go ahead and get it out and just give it to them because they have permission to it anyway. Think in terms of the audience and the type of data you're pulling out. You may or may not need the Dataverse security added to it. It may be just enough to secure the report and say, only the people in the senior leadership team are allowed to see this report because it has all the sensitive data. You're doing that for all kinds of reports already. Just treat this the same way. So which one is the right use case for me? Think of it in a continuum between lower complexity and higher complexity, and lower capability and higher capability. It really depends. And I can say if the Dataverse, if the query size is kind of, small enough that my query results are less than 80 megabytes, direct query might be okay. With Synapse, I have no limitations on those. It can be massive. Direct query, I can use Power Query, SQL to write that and pull that in from Dataverse. If I want to go up to using Synapse and use Spark and SQL and notebooks and all these data science kind of tools, all kinds of options available for me for there. Data mashup, I can use Dataverse and Power Query, and I could mash it up against something else. Probably not in a direct query, but I might could. With Synapse, I can pull it into the warehouse, grab data from everywhere, it'll be fine. Again, just a matter of one's a little less effort, one's a little more effort, but one has a lot more capabilities than the other. The other piece would be if I use direct query with Dataverse, every time I run the report, the user initially sees a blank report because it's going out and getting the data as it exists right now. So it is real time. That's an advantage. If I go over to Synapse, there's a pipeline that's moving that data out. So there is a little bit of a delay. It can be near real time or on an hourly, or I think there's actually a move to getting a faster snapshot in place. We can see data being surfaced that's being, kind of a snapshot on place. Sort of give up one for the sake of the other. And finally, the effort to implement. This one inherits existing security, but you're going to spend a lot of time on fine-tuning those queries to make them as tight and small and responsive as possible. On the other side, you might need to implement Azure Synapse, but you're only until you get to massive data sets, you're going to really be having to wrestle with security minutiae. So just a difference there. A couple of resources I will point out. There's a dev camp recording from a while back. Take a look at my Twitter feed. I've got a dev camp coming up where I'm going to dive deeper into the Synapse piece. Be aware of what that's coming up. There's the deck for this is out there. If you're new to writing reports, seriously, your first reports, if they're anything close to my first reports, they're going to be ugly, just ugly. And sorry, they're just not going to be pretty at all. If I had this core learning path, then I could have solved for a lot of mistakes that I made early on. This learning path is just a free designing effective reports. We have yesterday we had about 2,000 people going through it. About a couple thousand people are going through this every day. It's become incredibly popular because people are taking advantage of it every day to learn how do I make a visual that really tells the story I'm trying to communicate to my business users. And finally, I've got a bunch of links here. And to get this deck, if you would like the deck that I just presented, you can go to my GitHub repository and I'll grab a copy of that and drop it in the chat window for us, Rise. Let me grab that. Let me copy that. I think I can copy it. If not, I'll just grab a copy here from my link and you can go there and grab exactly the reports as well as I've got the presentation about what I've done here, and you can take advantage of that. There's actually another repository, Power BI Dataverse, and this is the report and the presentation. You can grab that as well. So just go to my GitHub. It's M. Scott Sewell on GitHub, and you can grab all the resources. I'm more than happy to share everything I have because really my goal is to get this into the community so that the people in the community, everyone in the community can take advantage of it and see what's happening because there's so much opportunity to really drive incredible investment for your incredible returns on the investment you've made. So I think I'm sitting right at the time limit. Raz, any questions or anything I should cover before I give you your time back so that you can, I know it'll end of a very long day for you.
Thank you, Scott. Look, I feel re-energized already.
Good.
And there are a few questions here. So first of all, David Moss. Hi, David. David Moss is one of the Power BI community leaders, and he was very impressed by the 12 million row count. David Moss is asking, what's the current SLA for syncing Dataverse to Synapse every 30 minutes or what?
Yeah, so there's not a published SLA. It actually is kind of like the data export service we had. Because there's not a published SLA that says here's exactly how long it's going to take. Currently, I think the guidance has been assume 15 minutes. My experience is it's faster, but you're not going to get an SLA being faster. So my experience in my case has been minutes, sometimes less than a minute. But that's not going to be a published SLA because there's a lot of things going on that may affect that. So think of it like, if you're going for your ERP system, most of the ERP reports, they're kind of overnight reports anyway. So it's typically not. If you need that real-time query, direct query is going to be the approach. But if you're okay with like grabbing a snapshot of a data from an hour ago, and pulling that in so you have really, really snappy response, that's going to be your approach.
Thank you. Sundram is asking, does Power Query ETL in Power BI data mart security trim based on user role?
Yes. So if you're using a direct query, it is passing your credentials to Dataverse, and Dataverse, because of Dataverse's API, it trims the data according to your security. So if you're only allowed to see my opportunities, that's all that was going to come down across the wire to you. I mean, nothing else will get there. You just like it, like the rest of it doesn't exist as far as the query that you write. So that's where Dataverse direct query works nicely or Power BI direct query against Dataverse works well. Again, I'm going to put that caveat down that is a slower approach because, again, when you open the report, there's nothing in the report. It's an empty report. It's only then it says, oh, Scott's wanting this report. Let me take Scott's credentials and pass that over to Dataverse and ask Dataverse to find the data for Scott and then pull it back in. So there's a lag time there. They have to be, you get one advantage, you kind of have to say, is that okay for what I'm using it for? It can be.
Thank you, Scott. There is a bit of discussion here around the use of GMT and summertime, the BST summertime. So that seems to be a common challenge in reporting as well as in general integration patterns. But yeah.
That's normal. That's common. Anytime. As long as we're all like working in the same time zone, and we're only working business hours or whatever, it's easy enough to adjust for, but it's something to pay attention to.
So Bernard Kirchner is saying very cool session. Many thanks. David Moss saying, Scott, fantastic session. 12 million Power BI users per month. Vijesh is also thanking everyone. We just want to thank you, Scott, for adding this. The previous sessions off the bootcamp today, we're focusing on customer value and insights, and fundamentally that boils down to reporting. And so essentially what you're empowering users and developers to do is to get more from the data and to leverage that better. So thank you for sharing those tips with us today.
And I can't tell you again how much opportunity there is as an individual to level up your career by saying, I'm moving not just the administration of this platform, but I'm really driving up for insights. And so all of a sudden, this platform that I kind of own and manage becomes that much more valuable by including this tool. So yeah, it's good. I think I see can we ask Power BI to always refresh the data when opened? Yeah, so Keshan, I see your question in the chat window. Yes, that is direct query again. So like I said, if you're using direct query, which is it's the slower approach that has only the data that the user is allowed to see. It is an empty report when you open it. Only then when you open it, it goes and gets the data. So Keshan, to your question, it is only getting if you're using direct query, it's getting the data at the moment the report's displayed. There's a lag time there, but it is getting the data as it exists at that moment. So yeah, you have that. And to your question there, like we've said, it is passing the credentials of the viewer to return the data they are allowed to see. But it's pulling it through that sieve of Power BI of Dataverse's security model, and it pulls it through there. So if you're okay with that lag, it is giving you that advantage you're asking for sure. And quick question, is data exports feature decommission, and Synapse is the only other option. Yeah, Synapse is the only option that is automatically built by Microsoft. It is the official replacement for it. I have other people who are not using data export service, and they built using Kingsway Soft or any other tools, have built integrate export services of their own. But the one that's going to be managed by Microsoft and the one that's going to be supported and expanded going forward is that Synapse data link. And I think once you get a handle on it, in fact, I'm going to do a dev camp in a few weeks. Once you get a handle on it, you go, this is the greatest thing since pocket t-shirts. It's great. It really works nicely.
So that dev camp, I've shared the link, so definitely can't miss that one. Looks really, really good, actually. First time I've heard about that, but it looks really, really good, the content. So I've shared the link in the chat there for that dev camp that Scott will be presenting, as well as your GitHub repo, Scott. So I just want to, once again, huge thank you for you to take your time out today to share your knowledge and the upcoming features and your tips as well, Scott.
Thank you guys for everything you're doing for the community. It's awesome. Hats off
Fantastic.
to you and to all the people in the community that make this platform great.
Thank you so much, Scott. Really appreciate that. Excellent, Scott. So there you go, guys. That was Scott Sewell, the legend. Hopefully look forward to seeing him in person at some point when things open up again.